When would you generally advise a brand to really start investing and thinking about incrementality and MMN to kind of help solve for that? Like what types of characteristics, whether revenue stage, whether what their media mix looks like, things like that. That's one part of my question.
Okay.
And the other part is then how does it actually work? Right. So let's say you have a brand. I don't know how you're going to define it. And I'm really curious as to how you define when to start investing in this. But what is the difference between how it actually works, how media mix modeling works for a brand that is more if infantile, that is just starting to get into that type of analyzation, to a brand that is much farther along in their lifespan, that is much larger and more complex?
Okay, this is a great question. I'll sort of talk through how I think about this, and this is honestly like I give this recommendation to people a lot when I get on sales calls, and I often am trying to figure out like what stage are you at and what should you be doing,
Yeah.
and a lot of times MMM is not a thing that they should be thinking about, and I will tell
Okay.
people that. So I'll walk through at least how I assess that from my perspective. So to start, brands should always be thinking about incrementality, right? That is the thing that actually matters because that's what determines the true return on investment of additional dollars invested into marketing. So even if you're not like explicitly measuring incrementality, it should be a thing that's on your mind from day zero of starting to spend on marketing. What am I getting for this marketing? And that answer cannot generally be answered just by looking at one report out of some platform. So always be thinking about incrementality, be thinking about how the reporting can mislead you about incrementality, and be focused on what is the incrementality of every dollar that I'm investing, because that's how you get to maximizing profit. So what brands generally start with doing is some amount of digital tracking, right? Assuming that there's some digitally native brand, that's great. Start with that. Hopefully you find one channel that works, you're blowing the wheels off. You don't need to think that hard about incrementality because it's like, look, clearly when we're investing these additional dollars, we're clearly getting a bunch of additional return. I don't need to spend that much time thinking about it. That's a great stage to be in. That's what you need to be focused on at the beginning days of a brand, is finding one channel that blows the doors off of it. So you don't really need to think that hard about the true incrementality. You need to think about scaling and dealing with all of the problems that brings. Next stage is you're starting to explore these other different marketing channels, right? You're layering on your second, your third, your fourth channel. There, what I generally recommend is don't think about MMM because MMM is hard. It's hard to get right. It's easy to be misled. Think about building an experimentation muscle, right? And that can take a bunch of different forms. It can be like, look, let's just be smart about our launch into this channel. Let's have a clear before and after period. Let's not do 3 things at once. So that way we can get a read. We spent, $10,000 on this channel in this month. Did we see a lift in revenue? You can do that analysis in Excel. It will be directional. It won't be perfect, but it gives you that good sense to know, like, was this a flat line and did nothing, or did it at least do something? And can we start to trust these numbers that we're getting from the reporting sources? Building the muscle of being able to run a geographic holdout test is another really good thing to be able to do. It's very simple to understand. They're not that hard to execute. A lot of the platforms have the ability to run incrementality tests these days. Meta has it. Some of the other ones do as well. Doing that occasionally and starting to get a sense for, okay, how is the results of these tests and experiments that have a really good sort of causal theory behind them to get to incrementality? How is that different from the reports I'm getting from other sources? Starting to think about that and having those conversations internally, that's really step 2. And so that's what I recommend to a lot of people that are in that stage of probably like, more than $500,000 a year in annual marketing spend, but like less than $5 million a year. Like that range is where it's like, you should start doing some experiments, start trying to learn from them, start thinking and talking about incrementality. And then once you're beyond that, like $5 million plus a year in marketing spend, you're generally at that point on more than 5 marketing channels, some of which are, offline or like connected TV, where it's like definitely the distance between a click and a conversion is going to be further and further away. Maybe you're expanding into retail, maybe you're expanding into Amazon at that point. That's where you want to start thinking about like, okay, let's get more sophisticated. Let's investigate MMM. Problem with MMM is that it's hard to do. It's hard to get right. The biggest problem with MMM is that it's easy to do it wrong. And so it's easy to mislead yourself. And that's the really big problem, is if you're not a statistician and you're not really good at it and knowing like where the sharp edges are, it's very hard to do right. And like, that's what we're building at Recast, but like Recast is an expensive enterprise tool, right? And like we've sanded off those sharp edges, but it takes a ton of work and is taken years of PhD research time to get that right. It's very easy to do it wrong. It's very easy to like plug some numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, get some numbers out on the other side, and like those aren't right at all, and it misleads you. And so I would say until you're at the point where you have enough marketing spend where it's really worth investing a lot of time and money into getting it right, where there's payoff there of like, yes, if we make our marketing spend 5% more efficient, it's going to be worth it. Then I would say like, don't really worry about it too much.